Steve Fudge, welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
It's good to be here, man.
Thank you for coming on.
Worries.
Thanks for fitting me into a no doubt busy schedule down there in London. But anyone that doesn't know who you are, would you mind just giving us a bit of a bio on you?
Yeah, I can do. I started out as a strength and conditioning coach. I left university in the early 2000s. I then did 3 back-to-back internships, University of Washington in Seattle, Sports Institute in Brisbane, and the Queensland Sports Institute in Adelaide and the Queensland Reds in Brisbane. I then came back to the UK to be an apprentice sprints coach for the UK sport programme, running into the 2012 games. So I was based in Cardiff in Wales. That's where I first connected with track and field in the world of track and field, and got sort of dragged in to help in support strength conditioning wise for sprint athletes. I worked for Welsh Athletics, and then around about 2010 I kind of left being a strength and conditioning coach and got into sprinting, coaching sprinters, and since 2010 I've done that. So I've been based in Loughborough for 7 years, and I'm now been in London for about 6 years. In that time we've coached, we've had lots of success. Over the 100 meters, we've had about 10, 3 or 4 people under 10:10, 2 under sub-10. We've had 3 or 4 girls under 11:10 in the 100 meters. We've had 1 guy sub-20 in the 200 meters. 1 girl 22.2 in the 200 meters. We've had a world championship performance in Jonnie Peacock, who won the world championships in the Paralympics, and recently we've had Felix Strang, who won the 100 meters at the Tokyo Paralympics. We've had lots of success, and we've had that sort of journey from strength and conditioning coach to sprints coach to working for the federation to now I'm based in London. I run my own coaching business. We mostly cater to sprint athletes, professional track and field people, and then on the side we do coach mentoring to coaches around the world. So that's pretty much me and what I'm doing right now.
Cool, super interesting. The internships in the US. And then two in Oz. What was the thought behind that? Was there any thought behind that? Was it just taking things as they came up? Was there links anywhere? Like anyone I've spoken to over the last 390 whatever episodes it is, not many people or no people have done internships that far afield.
Yeah, I think I did the whole sports science thing at university, and it's like when you finish that, it's like what's next. I kind of knew I wasn't really an academic, and being research studies and doing a master's and doing a PhD just wasn't for me. I'm very practical in the way I work and the way my brain works, and obviously got to that stage where I've got this, I've done the studying now, and I just want to see what's out there and kind of get a feel for what coaching is. At that point, I don't think I had any sort of aspirations of what type of coaching I wanted to do. I just kind of wanted to explore. And I think at the time I probably emailed, about 50 university colleges in America, because that's where my brain went to as a good place to start. And I think one of them got back to me, the University of Washington, Seattle, said, yep, come over. So I did that. And then when I sort of got to the end of that one, I thought, right, where next? That was interesting, that was good, but let's do some more exploring. And I really wanted to sort of look into the Olympic sports side of things. So then I thought, okay, the Australian Institute of Sports are a very wide, well-known thing. So I just emailed the guys there, and it was one of their it was the South Australian Sports Institute in Adelaide who got back to me and said, yeah, come over. So I did 6 months there. And then sort of just to finish it off, I was like, well, I've got another 6 months in Australia. Let's do team sports. So at that point I did, contacted a couple of teams in Australia, reached out to them, and I think the Queensland Reds got back and said, yeah, come over. So yeah, it was very, it was a bit of a journey. And it was different. The first one was college sports. which was very like big teams, big gyms, big teams, big facilities, college athletes with lots on their plate, lots of stuff. The next one was very individualized. It was, the main sports down there were sprint cycling. It was very complete shift to individualized type athletes, very Olympic based full time, lots more science, lots more medicine. And then when I swung it back to team sports again, it was different again. These were professional team athletes, larger groups, more sort of broad type coaching, I would say. So it was definitely a really cool experience to do all that right at the beginning.
So were you funding yourself through all these, or were these paid internships?
Yeah, I funded myself for the first one. I left university and then went and got like a part-time job in in a nightclub, and then do construction during the day, and just saved loads of money and just got a budget together and just went for it after that. And I think in the second one, I actually did start to pick up some part-time strength conditioning type work in Adelaide, and I also got a part-time job there just to keep the money coming in. But yeah, I mean, I think at that point I realized that I wanted to get experience. I realized that the experience that I was getting was going to be value in my career going forward. So I kind of invested in it really, and just worked hard to save my money myself. And yeah, I think when I look back on it, it was worth it. The experiences that I got opened up to, and the ideas that started to formulate in my brain, it's all paid off. So
yeah,
it's an investment,
100%. Now I know this isn't anything to do with, well, it is to do with what we were going to chat about moving forward into the sprint world and things. But I think for anyone listening who's trying to get into the industry, whether they're a strength and conditioning coach, whether they're a track coach, whatever they are, I think that's a really nice where you framed that, and just diving into the experiences and knowledge you've picked up along the way is a real good lesson for people, I think, to save the cash, self-fund, go out, get some experience, start to formulate your thoughts, move on. I think that's great. Yeah, really, really good.
Yeah, I think people are very sort of, you have to, you can't just come into the marketplace and say, employ me, that's just not going to work. It's just too many people. The volume's too huge. You've got to go out and actually learn some stuff, and then pick up some stuff. And then, you can then add value into any internship that you're going to. You can then say, look, I've learned this, I've done this. And, people are really sort of, they want you to come into their environment and enhance it. So I think you've always got to be thinking about what, can I make an impact to that person, because it's give and take in those situations, because they're not paying you. So you have to pay them by adding value. You have to give them something which is going to enhance the way that they do business, the way that they coach, the way that they can provide to their athletes. So I think if you can come to them and say, look, I've learned these skills, I'm not experienced, but I've got this under my belt, and I think I can offer this, and I can turn up on time. I can provide some positive support. I can clean up the equipment. I can do all those sort of things. And I think the more you sort of promote yourself as I can bring some positive into your space, then I think it's more easier to get these opportunities. And then obviously you get back just the experience of those situations, and you get to see coaching up close, and not just on a textbook, but what it means in real life, and how people start to interact. And then you start to learn that coaching isn't necessarily about all this sort of textbook stuff. It's about a lot of the the relationship building, the organization of the training workout, the communication with the coaches, and the all those sort of things you start to get your eyes open to. So yeah, look, it's I think it's a real positive experience if you come at it with the right sort of ideas,
Absolutely. Right. Let's dive in. Let's dive into the speed side of things. And like I said to you off air, and like I say to multiple people who come on the podcast, when speed is the discussion, or main part of the discussion, boomed over the last few years. Like, so much interest in this area. But let's take it right back. Principles of speed training for the guys and girls that you work with in the sprints.
Yeah. speed training is definitely it's in vogue right now. It's definitely something that people talk about. The interesting thing about track and field is I wouldn't actually say we coach speed. That's not our event. Like let's say, for example, you've got an elite 100-meter runner, they're going to do 45 steps in their race, right? So, if I ask you to do 45 push-ups, it's not going to be a speed event, right? So, it's very important just to define right from the outset that track and field is we're not coaching speed, we're coaching efficiency, we're coaching ability to distribute energy. We obviously want people to do that, quickly over the event, but the event isn't actually a speed event. So it's very important that, when people look to track and field to get some knowledge, is to understand what they're actually looking at, which I think is a very important point. In my mind, it's pretty simple. We've got two sort of situations going on. One is we've got the events that we need to prepare people for, and then we've got the individual. And we've always got this sort of two-way thing going on where the events are never going to change. In our world, there's going to be 100 meters to 200 meters to 400 meters. Those events don't really change. But obviously then we've got the individual. So, we do have to sort of realize the person that's in front of us. So there's always this combination in terms of principles that we have to train people for set events, but we have to then also get certain individuals who are bringing in all sorts of differences, through a training process as well. So you've got this combination between individualizing stuff and then generically preparing people for the event. So that's one of the sort of key principles is how that balance sort of works. And then for me, I just go through a really simple thing of, first of all, you need healthy athletes. That's number one principle. They need to be healthy. Number two is they've got to be able to move well. For me, because our event is about efficiency, because it is about distributing energy, movements and shapes are really, really important to have that in your program. I like to get those two things embedded in my program. They're really, really important to me because there's no point adding fitness on to somebody who can't move well. There's no point adding fitness on to somebody who's injured. So, once we've embedded healthiness, once we've embedded good movement practices, which those two are ongoing all the time, we then look to get people fit, generally fit. We then look to get people to work at sort of faster speeds, rhythmical speeds. Then we look to add in, exposure to higher velocity situations, and get them to deal with that. And then we look to get them to race. So that's basically my principles. I'm gonna look at the individual. I'm gonna look at the event that we're preparing people for. I'm gonna make sure people are healthy. I'm gonna make sure people are moving well. Then I'm gonna take them through this process of making them fit, making them rhythmical, making them fast, and making them ready to compete. That's kind of how I simplify it in my mind.
So movement, I want them to move well. Mm-hmm. That's what everyone ideally is looking for. Yeah. But what does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? And how do you, I suppose, define moving well?
Yeah, great question. Like for me, in our event, we've got to take people from a dead stop. We then need to move them through, like I said, just take the 100 meters, for example. We need to move them through 45 steps. For me, good movement is somebody who can, like the 100 meters or any sprinting event is, we've always got this challenge between, we're trying to get people to move very, very fast in the forward direction. And, essentially the event is controlling your ability to fall forward, if that makes sense. You're trying to press into the space and you're trying to keep your shape, in a very sort of, like a shape that's not reacting to the moment of not being able to cope with it, so your shoulders don't move back, your feet don't get in front of you to block you, and all those sort of things are just looking for the athlete to express themselves across the racetrack in a very smooth way, without too many big movements, without, reacting to the situation, without panicking and taking too many steps, all those sort of things are really, really important for us, because we want people to move down the racetrack very efficiently. So, when you sort of dial into the detail, what does that look like? Well, a lot of time that looks like people do more of their running in front of themselves than behind themselves. Our event happens in the space in front of us. It doesn't happen in the space behind us. And, good movement for me is learning how to occupy and have more of your sprinting action happening in the space in front of you rather than the space behind you. Then things that help that are obviously, athletes being very stiff, being very elastic, hitting the ground in the right space, underneath their pelvis, and then exiting the ground pretty quick, and then getting up front to organize their next steps. So all those sort of good movement, good timing, it all sort of runs in partnership with their posture and how they're holding their body and how they're reacting to the event. So, I've dialed off a couple of things there that are really, really important, but those are the sort of things that we're looking at. And to do that high velocity is a skill. So, what we try to do is we try to create situations where they're practicing that at high speeds, but we also then, we use our gym program and our therapy program to try and put the essentials of making this person's body move better. Can they use their hips properly? Have they got, good shoulder, thoracic movement? Are they able to rotate in the right places? Are they, are their feet, mobile enough? Is the ankle joint compliant enough? Are they got this sort of good relationship between a really strong hip and a really strong ankle, and, the knees in a healthy position? It isn't going to do too much of the run. And can they sort of, be really hip dominant in the way that they move rather than knee dominant? All those sort of things that we're trying to teach these patterns to help support their practice when they go to high speed,
Posture comes up, obviously, as you can imagine, comes up a lot when I speak to people like yourself who are in either speed training with team sport athletes or speed training with sprinters. In terms of a continuum from where you may start coaching and teaching posture, what would that look like for a beginner, and how would you build that up over time for someone who's a little bit more experienced?
Yeah, I always say to the guys that posture wins prizes. And we've just watched the World Indoor Championships where the guy who won the 60 meters won because his posture was better, and he was in control of his posture. And in our event, posture does win prizes. And we have to obviously have, we're not going to expose. We have to have things that they're going to learn at slow speeds and in the weight room, which is going to, then have some practices which are then going to expose them at higher speeds. And for me, it doesn't matter regardless of the level of the athlete or how much experience they have. We're going to teach them these things as they do, as they come into the program. Nothing really gets descaled down. We'd like them to do their drills in certain ways, and we'd like them to do their weight room stuff in certain ways, and we'd like them to do their high-speed sprinting in certain ways. And, in terms of the high-speed sprinting stuff, we use, as a lot of people do we use certain drills to emphasize upright running. We use certain drills to emphasize acceleration work. What we don't do is we don't want to have things in our drill sets and our exercises that we're giving our athletes which are emphasizing the wrong things. So we try and choose wisely about things to use to promote acceleration. So acceleration, for example, we'll use an Excel ladder as a way of quite simply teaching the athletes that they have to cover ground in the forward direction. That's what the Excel ladder is doing.
Explain the Excel ladder, Steve.
So an Excel ladder would be, we would stick down 13 marks on the ground, and we'd ask the athlete to run their Excel on top of the marks on the ground, and try and get their hip over each mark. And that way you're just simply teaching athletes how to be, how to understand what the event actually is, because a lot of people with accelerations think that it's about being quick. And in track and field, it's not about being quick. It's not about moving your limbs very, very quickly and getting to 10 meters in front of everybody else. That's not what it's about. It's about setting things up in a way which is efficient, a way which you're in control of your posture. So we use the Excel ladder just to teach that. It's the rhythm of acceleration. Because when we talk about posture can be completely disorganized by people trying to be too quick too soon. So, acceleration is a rhythmical activity, and we want people to do it in a way which safeguards their posture for down the racetrack. We don't want them to be spinning their legs and popping up their shoulders because they don't feel like they can, they don't like the fact that they're falling forward too much, that they're controlling their feet. A lot of people's feet will get, they'll use that as a control mechanism because they can't control the situation of moving from a dead stop into an excel, and they'll get their feet in front of them very, very quickly, and that will rise them up prematurely, which means they've got another 90 meters to run in the upright posture, which is impossible, right? So, we use these drills for acceleration to teach those sort of things. What we've done less and less of is we've used less and less sleds. I haven't coached sleds for a couple of years now. I don't have them in my program.
I'm going to interrupt Steve. While we're here, sleds, why? Tell us why.
For me, it's just simple. I want to teach sprinting in terms of occupying the space in front of them. And, what we do use is we use assistance training. So, the assistance is pulling you down the racetrack. So overspeed, because what that does is it emphasizes the sprinting's happening in the space in front of you. Whereas, for me, just looking at it very, very simply, if you were to come in and say, okay, that sled is now behind you, so then the whole of the action is now in the space that's behind you, right? So, for me, I know it's a controversial subject and it's going to cause chaos. But, for me, in terms of coaching, the sort of skill sets that I would like a sprinter to have, then I would say that the sled is counterproductive to the skill side of things. Now, obviously, it's not counterproductive if you want to use it as an extension of a weight room activity to build some, I guess you could call specific overload training, or, however you want to term it, then obviously it's going to help. But I think people get confused with thinking that sled is some sort of sprinting activity. It really isn't. It's not specific to the event in terms of the velocity, obviously, because you're pulling something and it's slowing you down. And it's not specific to the event in terms of sprint mechanics. So as long as you accept that and say this is a general preparation activity, which is going to enhance my general physical ability, which will then help my sprinting, I can understand the connection then.
Interesting. That is going to cause ruffle a few feathers. That's fine. Sorry, I like it. I'm tempted to ask, what other things that people have you kind of moved away from that are typical in your world that you would go, I'm not quite sure about that anymore?
Well, one drill that we do use is wickets. We use that. We get people to run over the cones. I would probably say that people use them with a sort of idea that it's specific to sprinting. But for me, again, that is something which is a drill to use to develop good sprinting form and good sprinting mechanics. But it's not something that is very specific to the event, because you're going over that thing probably 15% slower than you would do when you were sprinting, right? So again, in my mind, not that we actually use this drill, because I think it's important to teach shape development, but it's not something which I would then classify and say, this thing, if I do this, it's going to make people run fast in their event, because it simply isn't specific enough to the velocities that you would incur when you were actually sprinting. So, I think, again, it's just how you classify things and how you say, well, this is the thing that I'm going to use to make people fast, and this is the thing that I'm going to use to maybe general preparation, improve their physical development, improve their mechanical development, and then it's going to feed back into them executing their event, and I think it's just getting those sort of definitions right, maybe. But I'm not sure if there's anything else that's controversial.
No, that's fine. And it's not that you're saying these things don't have a place. It's just understanding where that place is, and not getting carried away that this is the silver bullet that's going to cure all. Or okay, cool. Just coming back to posture. So you said about developing posture in the weight room, developing posture on the track. I hate to dumb it down to my level, but when it comes to exercise selection, drill selection, what's that look like for you on a daily basis with your, again, using the whole spectrum, even though things aren't, like you say, things aren't dropped just because athletes get past a certain level, but exercise selection, drill selection for posture?
So, I mean, we have two types of, well, in our training week, we'll have an acceleration day on Mondays and Thursdays. We will then have a transition day on Tuesday where we practice transition stuff, and then on Friday we'll have an upright day. So what we try to do is we try to, because when you basically put sprinting down and go, okay, what are the skill parts of it? Well, you have an acceleration from a dead stop, so that's one part. You have a transition part. And then you have an upright part, and then obviously you have a part where, which is more physiology about holding on to where you're at and stuff. So, what we try to do across our training week is we try to hit on, two times into the acceleration part. We try to hit 1 point into the transition part and then 1 point into the upright part. So our acceleration type drills are, we like to, as we go through the warm-up, we like to really switch on the abs and the obliques and all those things. We try to get them really good at sort of being in a, I guess you could say, a flex position. We want them strong in that position because we want them to recognize that shape for when they get into their practice. So we do a lot of ab stuff, which is like reverse curls or rocking crunches. We do a lot of oblique work just to get things switched on. And in our acceleration development warm-up that we're kind of doing right now, we then might take it to, some sort of walking drills, but walking drills which are emphasizing the actual that we're going to practice. Like we do a thing, we do lots of hands on knees walking in the crouch position. We do lots of bear crawls to teach them that they have to move forward away from their pelvis rather than extending backwards. We do lots of sort of like hops, but teaching them to hop in a kind of like a position which is emphasizing flexion and moving forward with that flexion in the forward direction, if that makes sense. And we kind of then sort of, sometimes we might use the med ball in terms of that warm up, in terms of practicing. I think today we had them doing med ball slams. We had them doing some sort of drop jump as they went. But again, the emphasis was on receiving the landing, was, moving, moving the shin forward and then taking the hip in front of themselves, but then exiting the ground quite quickly. So we try to use our acceleration drills in a way which is emphasizing the skill sets that they're going to need to do in acceleration in the way that we'd like them to do. On our sort of transition and upright days, we again sort of say, okay, well, what is the sort of posture that we're trying to ingrain in our warm-up? And for us, one of the real important things in upright posture is we want a shape which is, if you were looking at somebody coming from the ground, from their feet, their shoulders would be slightly ahead of their pelvis. They'd have a slight forward lean to their posture. They would be pressing into it. We try to use drills on those days which emphasize that sort of forward lean situation. We very rarely will use the common A skip, B skip, C skip, because those drills aren't really teaching the shapes that we would like to teach on the racetrack. So, we kind of will use that sort of warm up to teach a couple of basics. One is, if they're moving down the racetrack, we always want them to have this idea that the shoulders are always going to be slightly front in front of them. We then ask them to make sure that if their shoulders are slightly in front of them, that their hips move in unison with that. They don't get left behind, because that's something which is an important skill set to learn, is that when you make your move down the racetrack, you want this sort of shoulder in front position, but you want your hips to move at the same time in unison. You don't want a situation where your shoulders get here and your hips get back here. So we do a lot of drills on that day to emphasize those skill sets, because those are the skill sets that we want them to then display in their sort of upright postures. So yeah, that's the kind of way that we take our drill, and we try and, like, the warm-up's a really good place to get some real educational wins in. You can use it to explain a couple of things that you would then refer back to when you're teaching the session. You might get into a difficulty when you're trying to explain somebody, how to transition, and you might go, well, remember when you did that drill where I had you with your shoulders slightly in front, and okay, that's what the position I would like to see. So they're very good educational shape teaching moments, which, again, because they're drills, they're not going to make you sprint faster. But when you get to the actual sprint coaching part, you can actually refer back to them, and the person will go, yeah, I remember though that felt like, I remember what that shape felt like. And I can then sort of use that in my high-speed practice, which is essentially what we're trying to, that's what we want them to be good at. So
if you go into any football club, rugby club, I would, in a warm-up or in what may be classed as a speed session, I would put money on the fact that you will see A skips and B skips in there. They've seen you guys do it, or in your case, maybe not do it, but other people in track and field do it, and that gets transferred because, you guys are the ones that make people fast for a living, so that gets translated over into a team sport setting. I know team sports athletes aren't your thing, but is that something that's made its way into other areas just because you guys have done it, or do you think there's merit there for that to be actually used outside of sprinters?
I mean, look, as you said, I spend my time coaching sprinters and coach mentoring track and field coaches mostly. I don't put a lot of time into coaching team sports athletes because my schedule is pretty full up with what I'm doing. But from the outside, I mean, for me, I would just say, like, for those people, look at their event, look at the acceleration moments that happen in the rugby, on the rugby field or on the football pitch, and just ask yourself, does that person look like they're in a shape which an A skip would be, right? I'm guessing that the person will be some form of crouch position in a flex position. I'm guessing that they will have to move themselves forward rather than up, because they'll be chasing the ball or going after a tackle situation or whatever, I don't understand then why you would see that happening in a game and go, well, that's the shape that they need when they have to excel in the game. They have to go after something in the forward direction. So why then would you do an A skip, which is, you're straight up and down, your shoulders are pointing to the sky, everything's about vertical force, So again, it's just simple for me just to look at that and go, well, yeah, again, that drill is teaching good posture, but it's not a posture that's specific to the event. So it might help in terms of physical control. It might teach some movement skills, which are general movement skills, but it's not actually specific to what you're trying to get them to do.
Could it be argued about developing rhythm, which is one of the things that you mentioned? Yeah.
Again, absolutely. And then that's what you say to yourself, well, I'm doing this to develop rhythm. Just don't kid yourself that you're doing it to improve acceleration in terms of the specific event. Just say this is going to help the rhythm, which then we'll use as a component to improving in their action. So I know it's semantics.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is because I think it sounds like it is, but I don't think it is because people see, again, you guys do it and then think that again is a silver bullet. and it cures all. Whereas it's a small component which could have a very specific rationale for doing it, versus it being the whole. Yeah. Okay, we've done our A skips and B skips. Boom, we're on the road. Like, no, there's a little bit more to it than that. Because if it was that easy, you guys just do that and you'd be flying, or your athletes would be flying.
I think the really important point is, like, we've all got limited time, right? You know, like, for example, somebody comes in and they warm up. You've probably got about 45 minutes in the warm up to get some points across and to teach some stuff. And then you've probably got a session which, let's say, for example, like you've got an hour. So let's say, for example, you've got 2 hours, right? You know, you've got to decide what you want to put into that 2 hours. And you then look at all the things that you can target. And then you've got to decide your biggest bang for your buck and how you're going to use your time wisely and how you would like to use your time. If you want to use your time to coach somebody to do a really nice A-skip, then do that, you know. But that's you decided to use your valuable time. And I'm guessing team sports situations have less time than we do.
In a warm-up, maybe?
You know? Yeah, so, I mean, the decision-making process has to go, well, do I want to just teach them something general? Or do I actually want to get down into the actual event practice? Then you make your decision how you're going to spend your time. And it might be the case that the general thing might be the safer thing to do in that particular context. And, you know, they might be getting a lot of speed-specific reps in their actual practice. So, you know, it might be the smart move. It might be the safe move and the good use of your time. So I think it's, as coaches, we have to decide that. We have to decide content and the time that we've got, and how much teaching moments that we'll actually have. And then we've got to go after the things that we sort of think are important at that time.
One thing that I think probably overwhelms a lot of team sport coaches, but I'm guessing this is the case when it comes to sprinters as well, is when you've got multiple people moving fast at the same time. And I say fast in relative terms, like even someone that's slow, when you're trying to actually analyze them when they're going as fast as they can, is fast. So how do you manage that when it comes to coaching large groups and getting the information in for what's going on as efficiently as possible, so you can then deliver cues and develop your exercise selection, etc.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously in my space I can control it. So I think as a coach you learn how you would like to control your training workouts. You know, for me, in our situation here in London, it's, you know, we'll have 2 groups of 6. We won't really have a bigger group than that because I can control my space, and I've made the decision that that's how I'd like to coach, you know, with smaller numbers. Because as you go through your career, you get to understand how you like to process things and how you like to see things and how quickly it takes you to see things. And how you'd use that time to use back to feedback and all those sorts of things. So I'm lucky in that respect because we coach track and we get to control our space. We're not told that we've got 10 minutes with 25 players or anything like that. So, you know, like, again, speaking from the outside, it's hard for me to sort of say that because I will always, I mean, this is part of coaching. I understand what I'm trying to get out of each day. So I organize the day and the numbers and the flow to make sure that as people walk through the door, they're going to get, you know, a situation where the person taking the warm-up, whether that's me or my assistant, they're going to get a situation where it's 1 coach and 6 athletes. They're then going to be able to get some therapy. They're then going to be able to start their track session where they'll have me being able to get feedback. They'll then be able to go into the gym where there's a similar situation where a S&C coach who's then coaching 6 people. And we get to decide that because we've decided that quality is important and we'd like to be able to feedback and we'd like to be able to, you know, teach movement, because that's when we go back to what's our principles. Well, movement is our principle. So how can you have movement as your principle and then coach 25 people at the same time? It just, you know, and that's fine. If it's not your principle, then that's fine. And then you build your sessions a different way and you coach in a different way. So we're lucky in that respect. We get to choose the environment. I guess for people who haven't got that, I think it's just simple things like being really set up and organized. You know, I see so many coaches they haven't got things set up before the session starts, you know, and the athlete turns up and says, right, what are we going to do? And the coach goes, well, I've just got to set this up. And, all of a sudden you're losing 2 or 3 minutes just because, I think it was Dan Path told me to read, I think the Americans call it pedagogy books or teaching books. And very early on in my career, I read a ton of books on classrooms. How do people organize the teaching schedule for large groups, and how do you get your points across in a way which is efficient? And a lot of it was just basic stuff like having the equipment set up so that you don't lose time and your brain's not on worrying about logistics, making sure that you've got a sequence of where you're going to take them through the drills, through their practices. It's all set up. You're reducing time that way, and you're given more time to be able to interact and teach as they go. Explaining to a large group what you're looking for and asking them to work with you. I think sometimes in smaller groups, the coach becomes the king and everybody looks to the coach. Hey, coach, how does that look? What do I need to do? But in a larger group, what you can do is you can throw it back to them and say, I would like this, this, and this. Can you guys work on it and let me know how you're going? So you put the emphasis on learning onto them and less off of you, because if there's 25 people in your group, you can't teach everybody. They have to teach themselves. So, what you can do is set from the outset, we're going to do an acceleration ladder today. I'd like you to do 13 steps. I'd like your hip to be over the tape marks. I want you guys to get on with it and try and figure that out. And that then puts the emphasis on them to learn, which then takes the pressure off you as a coach, because you don't need to constantly give them feedback and you're not teaching them. They're actually teaching themselves. So I think that's one thing I would definitely say is if you have bigger groups, that's one tactic that you can use. Another tactic is, the way you set up your drills might actually be providing all the external cueing you need. If they have to run over an Excel ladder and they don't make the Excel ladder, then they know they haven't got it right. They don't need a coach to come and verbalize it to them. That they're fully aware that they weren't over the marks and they didn't get it right. So, I think lots of external cues can be used, in a way which reduces the need for sort of verbal cues. And sometimes those cues are really valuable because athletes are pretty smart, right? And they can figure things out. And I think what lots of coaches like to do is they like to be king and they like to have all the answers and be the person that's holding all the information. But some athletes, if you trust them, they'll be able to figure it out for themselves, and they'll be able to actually make better discoveries with you just setting some guidelines about what you'd like to see and what you'd like them to investigate. And if you trust them a little bit, they'll be able to figure it out.
Is there anything else, any other examples that you could give us in terms of constraints like the acceleration ladder that you may use that could help those that are coaching 20, 25 athletes at a time?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the wicket drill, which is extremely popular, it's a magnificent tool for teaching the athletes that they have to move in the forward direction. If you set up a situation where you have cones, let's say you've got 14 cones, and very roughly they're 2 meters apart, for example, or whatever. You're instructing the athlete that when they exit the ground, their job is to cover the ground in the forward direction. The cones or the wickets, whatever you place in the ground, is giving them the indication of what they have to achieve. And, that's just a very simple way of just teaching them, a thing which is quite difficult to explain if you had to explain that to them. So, that's why we use the Excel ladder. That's why we use the cone drill, because it gives us that external reference point, and it's another way for them to actually understand what it is they're doing,
Do you think sprint coaches are sometimes, or people coach, I know we said you're not coaching speed, but speed coaches, whether it be team sport athletes or sprinters, say too much? Yeah.
Yeah. It's, look, I've been coaching a long time now, and I think what tends to happen in our world is you get partnerships where you have athlete, coach, and they're in sync, they're aligned. they've got a situation where the athlete is doing a lot of learning themselves, and the coach is also doing a lot of learning, because I mean, we have information, but in our world, it's the beautiful, execution moments under the bright lights are always going to happen when the athlete has done they've had a lot of ownership in learning the event themselves. And I think as a coach, your job is to get that to happen. And I think if you stand there at the side of a racetrack and you constantly are the person who's the expert and you know everything, and the athlete did that wrong, the athlete has no ownership in that interaction. They're just somebody who's getting verbally told that they're not doing things right. And I'm not entirely sure how they can then have responsibility and ownership for their execution when the gun goes, because essentially they've been not learning in a way which is going to allow them to, under pressure, be able to execute. So, I know we can jokingly say that coaches talk too much, but it's understanding that, in our world, you've got 8 people lined up on a start line. There might be a big crowd in there. It might be under the lights, and it might be a championship final situation, and you need to execute. And it's more likely that you're going to execute well if you've been in an environment where you figured it out yourself, and you've used the coach to get information, to understand what the event is, to understand what the coaches want you to do. But you've taken that information and you've got something which you've developed, which you are in control of, and you've got ownership of.
Superb. Well, I've kept you over the 45 that I said I would. Anyone that wants to figure out or find out more about you and the work that you do, the athletes that you're working with, where's the best place people to go?
Yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram. I've tried to get everything onto one place. I mean, it was hard to discuss the drills without actually being able to show them. So we put a lot of drills on our Instagram.
Do you know what it is?
It's I think it's FudgeLdnProject. At FudgeLdnProject, yeah. We every now and again, a couple of days a week, I'll try and share a couple of the drills that we do and a couple of stuff. So maybe that could give people ideas of illustrate what we've been talking about today. And then people can direct message me on there. That's absolutely fine. Happy to answer questions. We do a lot of coach mentoring if people want to get in touch. We have coaches all around the world: Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, all these places. We sort of, again, it's like our athlete coaching. We don't want to come in and provide all the answers to coaches. We actually look for coaches who have groups of athletes, and they basically want to sort of come to us and say, right, I'm doing this, this, and this. What do you think? I've got this athlete who's got this particular problem. Have you seen this before? Let's discuss that. So we kind of provide coach mentoring in that sort of way. We don't have like a curriculum that we're going to, give people. It's very much practical support to real life coaching,
Perfect. Sounds great. Well, good luck with what's coming up.
All right.
And I'll direct people to your Instagram where people can have a little dig around and see the kind of stuff you're doing. But really appreciate your time, Steve. Look forward to seeing how things go, and we'll chat soon. Thanks, buddy.
Cool. Thanks, mate. All right. Bye-bye. See you later.